everybody, it's Femtrooper, and today I'm going to be talking about 8 JRPGs that are just kind of mid. So we've all played JRPGs that are phenomenal, fantastic, you think about them for the rest of your life, and then you've played really, really bad JRPGs that you're like, that was so awful, I hate it, blah, 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 it's no good, I would never recommend it to anyone. But what about those JRPGs that are just kind of so-so, okay, mid, average, whatever you want to say, they're just like, they're not awful, they don't bring you pain, but they're not phenomenal experiences either. And that's why I want to talk about what those are for me today. And yes, I am super aware that this is going to anger a lot of people because there are games in here that I am referring to as just and I know some people, they're 10 out of 10s. So I'm very aware of that. It's a personal subjective list. And if I say a game is just meh and you think it's a 10 out of 10, it's okay. We all have different opinions, and in fact, some of you guys might think, I'm actually being too generous. Some people might be like, that's really bad. That's a 1 out of 10. Doesn't matter. It's just a fun list. Before we get into my list, let's make sure you're subscribed if you're not. Please click like and comment what you think is a mid JRPG. I'm actually curious. All right, let's start this list off with a game in a series that I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite series of all time, and that is Pokemon Violet. I really just thought this game was okay. To be fair, I haven't really loved the last two generations of Pokemon. So there's that. But I just feel like they're just so open and bland, and they're not the same experiences that we had even 10 years ago. Forget 30 years ago, but just, some of the 3DS games were really cool. These are just not very exciting to me. They're very bland and boring. I find the worlds that you explore to be very mundane, nothing exciting to see, and the stories are just boring, and I really don't like the gameplay as much anymore. It's so open, they're trying to almost be like this sandbox thing, and it's just not working for me. I really want to go in a town and check things out. And in this game, you couldn't even go in houses. Like, I don't know what was going on here. The reason that I'm not giving it like a 1 out of 10 and it's just average for me, and that it's actually not the worst, is that the story was a little compelling and a little bit of a tearjerker at the end. And I thought that was kind of neat because Pokemon stories aren't known to be awesome. They're kind of the same thing every time. But this was just, I didn't like what they did with the bad guy team. I didn't like what they did with having to do gyms. Like, it's just, nothing was fun, nothing was exciting, and I know some people really like the direction the series is going, but for me, it's just kind of boring. So that's why Pokemon Violet and Scarlet, they're just mid to me. Here's a game that I actually do recommend playing. It's just not, phenomenal. It's not going to make my 10 out of 10 games list, but it's actually worth your time, and that is Bug Fables. This is just a really okay, good game. It's nothing special. It's like a 7 out of 10. I do think it has some good stuff. It has a very Paper Mario kind of style, where you're walking around, and there's a little bit of platformer type sections, and you do go into very interesting towns. There are positives, and that's what brings it up for me. I loved the towns in this game. I loved going to different areas. It was really neat. I just found the story kind of bland and a little bit boring, to be honest with you. So I wasn't really feeling it. I wasn't dying to know what happens next, and I wasn't obsessed with it by any means. But it does have interesting combat. It's a neat game. I really like the fact that you're bugs, and there's different enemies, and they're different types of insects. It's neat. It's just not phenomenal by any means. But like I said, that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just a really okay game. But I still recommend it, if that makes sense. Okay, now here is one that is gonna make a lot of people upset, but for me, it really was just average. This was not the worst by any means, but it's not my favorite, and I really didn't dig it at all. And that's Final Fantasy XVI. I'm sorry, but it's really just okay. There were so many parts that you had to get through that were so tedious and so unnecessary and almost felt like fetch quest, side questy, and it was why am I doing this? I just want to see what happens. I understand side quests, I understand their purpose, but there were main quests in this that were just this game is dragging. Like, this game is so boring right now. And then something incredible would happen. Something so epic. The most epic boss fight you've ever had in your whole life. And a crazy cutscene that was, like, beautiful CG. And then you go right back to some fetch quest where you have to go talk to somebody and defeat some monsters. And the NPCs look like they were from a PS2 game and had the most soulless faces. And I was just not feeling it. So it's not that I don't recommend Final Fantasy XVI, it's just not my Final Fantasy. I would much prefer like a Final Fantasy VII or 9 or 10. This was just, it went back to its roots with the medieval thing, which I think is great, but it didn't do it for me personally. I think it started off really well and it got pretty boring in the middle, and then it had a nice ending and I was kind of just happy it was over. And I kind of hate that. I like when I'm happy it's over because it's fulfilling. I don't like it when it's happy it's over because I'm just bored. Here's a game I was really excited to play, but it's just kind of forgettable. And I know a lot of people still recommend it, and a lot of people really like it. And that's Trials of Mana. This game is just okay. It's just okay for me. Like, it's fun. I really liked that it kind of gave me PS2 vibes, the way they did it. It kind of felt like something I would have played 20 years ago, and I liked that. It was kind of neat, and I did like exploring, and I liked going in the towns. But the story was just really blah, and it was just not that exciting. It didn't grab me. It was just okay. And I think it's neat that you can play as different characters and there's different routes to take, which makes it have some replayability. Super cool. But man, I don't know. I just found it a little forgettable. Like, it just really was just okay. And everything was very much like it felt AA and not AAA. Like, it just didn't feel like the best thing ever. And that's not to say that it has to be. But for me, like I said, it's very mid. Next, we have a game that I was actually really looking forward to playing, and while I still like it, to me, it's just whatever, and it still hasn't hooked me into the series. I've yet to get into the series. This is the second game in the series I played, and it was okay, not awful, but that's Tales of Symphonia Remastered. So I'd never played it on the GameCube. I played this one, and man, it had a strong start. There was some wacky stuff going on here. There's some really creepy stuff with what they're doing with these people, and I was like, whoa, this game is gonna be awesome. And then, yeah, it has that experience that I love. The big grand adventure, going across a big world map. You know, very cool, and exactly what I want. But I kind of stopped caring because the story got kind of boring. Again, a lot of this is boring for me. It's not about gameplay. It's not about, music or something else. It's more just, is it hooking me? Is it grabbing me? And it really did at first. And then it got to the point where I was just kind of bored, and then I just wanted it to end. And I thought, this game is still good. It's a good, solid JRPG, but it's just not amazing. There's nothing, phenomenal about this game. I'm not, gonna go talk to people about it. And that kind of made me sad, because so many people like this one, and I was kind of like, oh, geez. Now, it does have a lot of puzzles in it, and kind of like Zelda-y puzzles and dungeons, and I hate that. So that's part of the reason that I didn't like it, and if you do like that, you're gonna love that. But I don't know, I'm sorry, it just wasn't for me. Here's a game that is actually a really solid mid recommendation, because I think everyone agrees that it wasn't that great, but it's also not awful either, and that's Infinity Strash Dragon Quest The Adventure of Dai. Blech, that's a hard one to say, but it's actually kind of cool, but it's also what were they thinking at the same time? Because it really plays out like a visual novel. It's a lot of still images, but the gameplay is still fun. The story is actually good, but it kind of stops once you're excited and you're like, I wish there were more story stuff here. And then I also just found, after a while looking at still images, and it felt like you're kind of reading a comic book, it was just you could have had some more cutscenes in here, guys. You could have had some actual, animated cutscenes. This is based on a manga and an anime, so it's kind of a letdown. It really feels like they took something really great and were like, you know what? Let's just, not spend the money and make it just average. And that is what they did. They made it average, and I'm not... I don't feel bad about saying it, because I think we all agree that it is very average, but I still did enjoy my time with it. So it's not like a bad experience I had, but it really is just okay. Next is a game that I actually just recently finished back in May, and it's Granblue Fantasy Relink. Now, this game is not bad. And in fact, I think some people would hold it higher than me for other reasons, because I think there's a lot you can do with multiplayer aspects, and once you actually beat the main story, there's a lot more for you to do. For me though, it's just a main story thing, and the main story is short. It's like somewhere around 15 hours, maybe under that. I don't remember, but it's like short. For JRPG standards, it is not long. So, you know, kind of cool, because you're like, oh, it's a JRPG, I can beat really quick. But the problem is, and as much as I hate to say this because I don't want 100-hour games, with a JRPG that's 15 hours, it's hard to make it really compelling, because it's not enough time for you to really care about a lot of stuff. And because it's already based on stuff, they kind of just throw you in. It's not the worst. Like, you're not like, what's happening? Like, they give you a bit of a backstory and you're like, okay. But the problem is you don't really know everything. And so you're kind of like, okay, there's this cast of characters here and they're on this adventure, and that's cool. And it had a lot of potential, but the story is just okay for me. Like, yeah, you're trying to find someone, and you know what it felt like? It felt like an anime, and you're like, this is episodes 20 to 40, and then that's it. And then you're like, I know there's more here. And it felt like there could have been more. Like, it could have been a 40 to 50 hour game, and it would have been a lot better and more interesting. I would have liked to have seen more towns. I would have liked to have seen more bosses and just more interesting things, but it wasn't enough time. It was just like a snippet, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess it's done now. Because even at the end, like, it wasn't like an end, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, oh, they're still on their adventure, and you're like, I wish I could still keep playing in a way, but I also don't want to do any of the side stuff that, it's just okay. It's really, I felt that when I was playing. I'm like, this game is absolutely gorgeous and one of the best looking anime games I've ever seen. So, wow, kudos to that, because it looks great, but it's really just average in terms of a story that you're gonna get if you just do the bare minimum. So please don't take my recommendation if you're like, oh, well, I did all the extra stuff, and, you know, okay, fine. But for me, if you're just looking for a game to pop in, you know, go from A to Z, it's really just mid. It's really just average. I was not like, oh my god, this is gonna make me think about, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, there's some games where you're like, I'm thinking about that 20 years later. I'm still thinking about the ending, or that game made me feel so emotional or whatever. This is not that. I don't feel emotional about it. I don't really care about a lot of stuff. It was just really average. So yeah, it's okay, but yeah, there you go. Last but not least, and it is kind of a cool game. In fact, it's cool enough for me to want to play the sequels. So it's not that bad. It's just not amazing for me, and that is Rhapsody, a Musical Adventure. I do not own my copy anymore. Yeah, it was just okay, so I got rid of it. So Rhapsody is a very unique game in the sense that it actually is a musical. Like, there are literally songs being sung in this game. So cool in that regard, but just, I found the story really average. I didn't think the main character was that interesting. Just really average stuff here, guys. Dungeons, bland. Nothing was like, whoa, I can't believe how beautiful this area is, or I can't believe this and that. It was just really average, and I know some people really connected with it and thought the story was super emotional, but I just did not connect with it. So for me, it was a really average game. However, I like the concept of it being a musical, and I like, you know, cute, whimsical, charming games, so I am willing to give the sequels a shot. I do actually own them on the Switch, the Rhapsody 2 and 3, which were just recently released in North America, like last year or whatever. So I'm super excited to check them out, and maybe my hope is that I'll like them more than the first one, because the first one I just found it average, and it was frustrating, because I really wanted to like it, because I'm like, this sounds like it checks off every box, but the story just didn't stick with me, and that is the problem. So everybody, those are some JRPGs that I find to just be average. I just found them to be okay. They were not phenomenal, but they're not bad either, and I still recommend them. And hey, one thing, aside from Rhapsody, because I did trade that in, all these games are games I still own, and the reason I own them is because they're not horrendous to me. If a game is absolutely horrendous, I usually trade it in. But I do think these games have something in them, you know, whether it's like phenomenal graphics, the best soundtrack ever, or just really fun gameplay but boring story, whatever. I kept them. That's why I was able to hold them up. So sorry about Rhapsody, but I have these guys here, and that has to say something. So I do think there's something in there for everyone. Some of these games I know people like love. So yes, I may have said some unfavorable things, but that's what I do sometimes. I just try and be honest with my personal taste and my opinions. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And of course, I really do want to know what JRPGs you think are mid, because hey, there's probably some that you think are just really average that I think are amazing, because I know I've come on here and said there's some games I like and then people are like, I think that is awful. So that's what it's all about. That's what makes it fun. So I really want to know, and again, thanks for stopping by, and I will see you guys in my next video.